I always say a door that God opens, He
Right.
keeps open, but a door that you open, you have to keep open. And so I love walking through the doors that God has for me and leaning on my faith in everything that I do, whether it be in a classroom or in a counseling session or in church leadership.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Engel, president of Southeastern University, and joining me is our co-host, Michael Steiner, our SEU Senior Vice President for Advancement and Innovation. And we're excited today to welcome to the podcast Dr. Christina Gard. Great to have you here with us.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Privilege. Christina serves as the senior pastor of Grace City along with her husband, Andrew, here in Lakeland, Florida. And Christina is an incredible mother, leader, an amazing professor here at Southeastern, and we go way back. I hired you as a professor actually at Northwest University.
Yeah.
How many years ago now?
That was 16 years ago.
16 years. Wow.
It's a long
goes by.
time.
Yeah, it sure it goes by fast.
We haven't aged, though.
No. We're doing the same. So, but great to have you today, and thanks for taking some time to
Honored.
to have a
I'm
conversation.
excited to be here.
You know, you have an incredible journey. You come from a family legacy of ministry, preaching, but you almost went down a different pathway. You were going down kind of the legal, political studies path before you really discovered calling that God was really placing on your life, both in the mental health field and, of course, in ministry. When did you realize that kind of call, and you kind of embraced it and began to fully step into it? So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it was probably 20 years ago. Andrew and I were living in the Washington, D.C. area, and we had moved to D.C. for me to go to law school, and I had wanted to pursue a career in politics and law, and I had decided I don't want to be in law school my first year of married life, and had said I want to defer 1 year, enjoy our first year of marriage together, and then start law school. Yep. And so I got a job doing crisis intervention work in Washington, D.C., and specialized in working and doing gang interventions, and worked with MS-13 gang members in Washington, D.C. I was the only female on our team, and loved getting to work with these young male juvenile delinquents, and saw that as a therapist in that realm, I could be proactive, and as a lawyer, I'd be reactive. I'd be helping after the fact, but decided I wanted to go into the mental health realm because I could be proactive in helping people, hopefully before they did something that they would regret, and saw so much impact and life change in these young men's lives. And most of them just needed a mom, needed a woman to believe in them, and needed some nurturing care. And so abandoned law school, ended up going to graduate school in the psychology and eventually ministry realms, and never looked back.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first went to Northwest University and started meeting students and so forth. And I remember Don Argue, who was president there at the time, he said, keep your eye out on Christina. She could be, you had been Miss Alaska, right? And he said, she's probably going to be the next governor of Alaska. I said, okay. So, I was watching your life along with Andrew and all of that. But it has been amazing to see how God has shaped your life. And I want to ask you, how does your faith really inform, as you're in the roles that you are now in ministry, and of course as a professor here at Southeastern University, how does your faith inform your leadership approach in both ministry and in mental health?
Faith informs everything I do. I have, as a mental health professional, I worked in community health care. I worked in government. I also worked in private practice. And I always tell people private practice was my favorite because I was able to lean on my faith and able to pray before sessions. And faith really is the bedrock foundation and the answer to every problem that I've ever faced. So whether it's in church leadership, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in a counseling session, the answers can be found in the Word of God and through prayer. And so it informs everything I do and every decision I've ever made. And my career path didn't end up the way that I had anticipated. And you mentioned Dr. Argue. He was one of the most formidable influences in my life, especially early on, and really encouraged and nurtured that love for politics. But primarily, he always said, you have to do and you have to go down the path that God has for you. And so it's not necessarily about what your career or your vocation is. It's about what is the door that the Lord is opening for you. And I just consistently kept seeing God open these doors that I didn't anticipate walking through, like the day that you called and were like, hey, would you be interested in this position at Northwest? And I thought to become a professor, I'd have to be, 50-something years old. And I was 26 years old when you called and gave me that opportunity. And my faith is what kept me walking through the open doors. And I always say a door that God opens, he keeps open, but a door that you open, you have to keep open. And so I love walking through the doors that God has for me and leaning on my faith in everything that I do, whether it be in a classroom or in a counseling session or in church leadership.
And I think a lot of our listeners are in that moment where they maybe start feeling that, right? Where, okay, I studied all this, I thought this was my career path, but now I'm feeling this plug pull this different way. What advice would you give them if they're kind of wrestling with that same thing? How do they make that pivot? How do they kind of lean into the path that God
I love that question. And I think sometimes we feel like, well, this was what my major was, and so this is what I have to do. My undergraduate major was in communications and organizational management. I was going to do political science and law in graduate school, and it doesn't make sense necessarily on paper, but I have consistently utilized all of my education in the ways that God has opened the door. And so when the Lord opens a door, you have to walk through it regardless of what your major was. And sometimes, I'll have students say, well, my mom wants to know, how am I going to use this degree? We don't always know exactly how God's going to unfold things. I never imagined that I would utilize graduate degrees in psychology in the church, and I utilize it every single day. And didn't think that having a love for children's ministry would have ever been utilized as a children's pastor, but it was. I was a children's pastor for 6 years, and God opens doors that you have to choose to walk through regardless of the degree, and trust that that education will never go to waste. One of the things, and obviously you guys are as well, I'm the biggest proponent of education because it never goes to waste, and it can always be utilized, maybe not in the way that you anticipated being utilized, but God never wastes anything.
Right. And there's a certain mindset that you have to have, though, to not let your education go to waste. Because I think so many, especially this generation, you see it, everybody wants prescribed paths. They say, I need to know exactly what A, B, C, D is, all the way up to where I'm making $250,000 a year with 4 kids in a suburb.
Nice?
Right. But having that mindset of like, okay, every single experience can lead you to the next thing, even if it's not some pre-described career path. It takes a little bit of courage. I mean, it takes
courage and detours and delays and trust that that God is going to work it all together for the good, and not being so caught up in, oh, well, this door didn't open the way I thought it was going to, the way I thought it was going to, like becoming the governor of Alaska, which was my plan to then end up in the presidency of the United States of America. That wasn't the doors that the Lord was opening, and instead I'm in leadership in church and in academia. Never would I have anticipated, but those detours are actually what brought about the fulfillment of God's call and his purpose in my life. And so I think sometimes we'll say, well, it's not the way I thought it was going to look. Good. Because God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And so don't get so caught up in the plan of how point A connects to point B, and enjoy the detours and the delays on the way.
So how can pastors and parents help coach someone in the middle of all that? Like, how can they kind of pull them out to say, hey, it's okay, this is part of it? What's some of the ways that you would recommend they lean into those conversations?
Great question. I think anytime somebody asks me for advice or counsel, I'm always asking people, what have you asked God for? And have you prayed about this? And anytime I don't know what to do, I always commit time to fasting. We just ended a church-wide fast last week, and I always find God gives me clarity of thought and clarity of focus. But as a parent and as a pastor, we have to be careful not to prescribe what we want onto other people. And so I don't give counsel, I don't give advice without first saying, hey, what has the Lord said? And then I always love giving counsel in forms of questions and in forms of options. I always tell people, and I'll tell students, as a therapist, you have to be very careful, because as soon as you tell someone what to do, you have just prescribed a solution that may not have been God's solution for
Right,
their life
right.
and may not be what the Lord wills. And so I
Very
always
wise.
give people options and give them, here's the different paths. What do you think is the path that the Lord has for you? I know as a parent, I want my kids to do X, Y, and Z. And, in my home, college is not an option. It's like graduating from high school. You will graduate from
Right.
college. And then depending on your career choices, I do think graduate school is a must.
Yep.
But depending on their choice, there are some things I think are important, inevitable goals to set for your family. But you have to be careful not to prescribe what you want onto their lives, because God made them in His image. And so what is His desire and His divine design, not Christina's design? What is God's design for their lives?
Yeah, so good, and it is. It's about life stewardship, understanding that when God created you, He knew all along, but it's a journey that He unfolds in your life, and you just have to learn how to perceive, discern, discover, follow your passion, and obviously He put a lot of passions in your life, and that He has provided opportunities for you to grow, to learn, to fulfill many of those passions. You've, not only been a professor here at Southeastern, but you served as campus pastor, you and your husband here for 5 years before planting Grace City, and wow, and now the ministry you all have established here in Central Florida and Lakeland has been amazing. You have couple of campuses with the church. Also, you recently finished your PhD in psychology and at Regent University, which we're proud of you for that accomplishment and all you're doing.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, how have you seen your education affect the way you lead in culture in the local church, as well as the students that you serve in the classroom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that question. I think education is such a gift because it challenges our presuppositions and the maybe natural bent we all have. I love being in a classroom and having a student ask me a question that makes me think differently about a subject. And I have found consistently through undergraduate, through different graduate programs that I've done, it always challenges my natural way of thinking. And for me, I think we can become so rote and so fixed and so caught in our ways. Even the conversation Michael and I were having before this about using AI or Chat GPT. I get so caught up in my natural way of doing things that I'm like, I don't even know if I would want to explore learning new things.
Right.
But education helps me challenge my status quo and challenge my natural comfort zones and makes me go, okay, well, how could I utilize this to my benefit, to my advantage, and to help expedite time? It challenges my way of thinking. And so I think anything in culture needs to be challenged, and education helps us learn how to do that with a critical mind, but not seeping from a critical mind into a poisonous critical heart. And I love challenging concepts. I love challenging status quo and utilizing a critical mind to do so, but being very cautious of not allowing that to poison us to become critical of other people or other ways of doing things. And I love, there's so many different ways to lead in academia, in church, in culture, in society, in politics. And I'm quick to, I'm not in that seat for a reason. And to be slow to judge, quick to pray, and always trying to encourage what God has called somebody else to do.
Yeah. That's incredible, powerful.
And I think these are different principles that you guys actually integrate with Grace City Leadership College, which is another ministry you have out there, and we love supporting that. Tell us a little bit about what was the journey in founding that, the mindset, how has that kind of helped your church? I know we have a lot of pastors that listen to the podcast that exploring that.
Yeah.
What would you tell them if they were looking at that kind of program?
I think Grace City Leadership Institute is one of the best parts of our church and one of the best parts of our ministry, and something Andrew and I were committed to from the beginning, which was probably 17 or 18 years ago now, that my husband Andrew had a conversation with Dr. Engel about pioneering this concept, and they were out in the Seattle area, the very first kind of prototype for this thought was, how do you give people experience in the local church to become pillars in their community, to become servant-hearted leaders? How do you do that in the local church, but help them get a college education? And so they pioneered something like that out in the Pacific Northwest. And so when we started our church, after Andrew was the campus pastor here at Southeastern, we knew GCLI had to be an integral part of it. And so within the first year of our church, which we're a brand new baby church plant, we're figuring out how to pastor, how to care for people. Now, we did have an unusually explosive journey. There was 1,200 people coming in our first year as a church. And so we had such a huge base of students that we were like, we could start something like this rather than waiting to year 10. We could start something like this. And I really believe, because of Andrew's experiences with Dr. Engel, because of our experiences in higher ed, we were uniquely poised to have a truly exemplary program. And I'm so proud of GCLI and these students who are learning how to serve in God's house, how to be pillars in the community, but also having a college education to show for it. And so what we used to see as a prototype of a program resulted in years in service in the church, but no college degree. And so I loved when you and Andrew cultivated something like this. I think it's an incredible program for any listener that is a pastor that's thinking about doing something. Do it. Learn. You guys at SEU set churches up and teach how to do it so well. So do it. And don't. And if you're afraid, good. Do it afraid.
I love that. We need to take that and make it a commercial.
Right there.
That's perfect.
I love it.
Excellent. In fact, Grace City just celebrated what, 9th anniversary?
Yeah, our 9 year in September.
Wow.
9 years old.
And powerful ministry. You have seen thousands of people make decisions to follow Jesus over the years. What do you think is the key to cultivating that kind of impact in people's lives?
Andrew is uniquely gifted in he's an evangelist at heart. From every Sunday we've ever had at Grace City Church, we've seen somebody get saved. So we've seen over 10,000 salvations and have a huge college student base, both from Southeastern and the other colleges in our city. And so I've seen a lot of students come to know Jesus. And I think it's a unique grace on his life, but two, I think we made a decision to remain culturally aware and relevant of what do people need when it comes to discipleship and when it comes to hearing the gospel message? What is a methodology that helps us get out of the way of the message? Because the message itself is magnetic. So getting people into the doors of a church. And so we do that through lots of different ways. Like right now, actually this exact moment, we have rally happening across campuses. There's 11 different schools in our county where our students who are interning, who are GCLI students, are learning how to preach the gospel. So right now they're in public schools.
Wow, that's great.
And they're learning, how do I preach a gospel message? So we host this thing called Rally, where students have the option during their lunch break to come, hang out, hear what we have to say, and students do. And last year we saw over 1,200 students come to know Jesus in public schools across our county. So that might not be something that, not 20 years ago when Andrew and I first were married, that we were like, this is going to be a part of our ministry. But because we want to remain culturally aware and relevant, we can't always wait for them to come to us. Sometimes we have to go to them. And so we've seen huge impact as a result of that mindset.
No, that's exciting. Speaking of Grace City, I think you have something exciting happening this coming fall, and something new that's happening.
Is it? Well, we just had our groundbreaking.
Okay. Maybe that's what I was hearing. But
was it our women's conference that's
might be,
next month?
No.
What is it?
I had something that was happening big in the fall. Maybe I don't know if it has to do with what you're doing with the new building and all of that. Tell us a little bit about that project.
The groundbreaking.
The groundbreaking. You guys have new facilities, a whole new project, all that kind of stuff. Walk us through what's happening there.
So we just had our groundbreaking. So we might be talking talking about like the breaking ground and the walls will be,
okay. Yeah.
Andrew's much more well-versed in all the details of all the construction, but we just had our groundbreaking this past Saturday, got to dedicate the land to the Lord. We have 50 acres off
it's
of
beautiful
98,
area.
which is a miracle in and
Yeah.
of itself that we got that land, that we'll be able to build our forever home. We're building our church facility, which will see a little over 1,700. It's around 75,000 square feet, that facility. We're also building a counseling center. We're building dormitories, student housing, athletic fields. We'll have a sports pavilion. We'll have a chapel reminiscent of our very first location off of South Florida. So it's going to be a massive campus. Running trails, fishing pier.
Yep.
We have all kinds of thoughts and vision in our heart. And of course, vision costs money.
Right.
We've already raised over $9 million and praising God for what He's brought in. And so, Lord willing, as long as we can raise the final $3.5 million, we will see those walls resurrected and foundations being laid. And in May, actually, we will see walls.
That's great.
And so we will be moving into that facility summer of 2026.
26. Okay.
And I think this vision speaks to a heart that you guys have, which is to be plugged into a community.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things I've loved watching about Grace City and yours and Andrew's ministry, about being so connected to the city of Lakeland and loving on there.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit, for pastors that are listening to this podcast and they're in there, what does it mean to get plugged into the city, and how can they even, if they're sitting here thinking, man, how do I get more attached to my city? What are some of the principles that they could be engaging there?
First.
Okay.
Serve first. So right now we have 27 local and global partners, and the majority of our partners are here locally. And so rather than going to an entity and, thinking of how can they benefit you, we think, how can we serve them first?
Yep.
And so showing, every week we have serve groups that are serving all across our community. Every month we have serve days. Every quarter we have bigger serve days. And every year we have a massive serve day where we're just trying to make people aware of the needs in our community. So often we think, I have to go to Zambia, which our church is doing this year. I have to go to Zambia to serve. Well, yes, go to Zambia, but also serve right here in your local community. And I've found that in the last 9 years of being a church, we have seen so many people amazed at what we're willing to give financially, what we're willing to give via people, what we're willing to give via encouragement.
Yep.
Like the number of ribbon cuttings and ceremonies that I've been to. I love being a part of those events because it shows, hey, we're here to support you. We're here to be there for you. And we always say, if Grace City were to disappear tomorrow, would our community feel it?
Wow. Yep.
And I'm proud to say, all these 11 schools that we're at right now, they would feel it.
Yeah,
all these 27 local and global partners, they would feel it because the financial support that we lend and the people that we bring and the encouragement that we offer, they would feel that. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
And that was always our hope, is that not we were just starting another church to be a Christian club, but to actually make an impact in people's lives. And so it's been an incredible journey to see that actually happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no. Well, Christina, it's great to have you on the podcast today. Just love both you and Andrew, and just to be able to watch your lives and to see how God has used you. And you have tremendous gifts and deep passions that God has blessed you with. And it's great to see the journey unfold and the different ways and opportunities that He's opened the door. I still think, he put a passion about politics or leadership in your heart. I don't know that that's necessarily done.
Yeah.
So
I don't think so
I would
either.
think
We'll
about
see.
that. I think there's plenty. You can start right here in the city and run for commissioner. Or,
I love it.
to make a difference in lives.
Yeah.
That's the heart, and that's what leadership like that can do as well. And so,
Thank you. I
but we're
appreciate
just
that encouragement.
grateful for you and Andrew. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for hiring me 16 years ago when I didn't think I would ever get to actually be a professor until I was 60. You believed in me at a really young age and have consistently been part of mine and Andrew's story. And so we honor you and Karen, are so grateful for you guys and every opportunity you've given us. I truly am so grateful.
Thank you.
So thanks for having me today, guys.
And if you want to stay up to date with Pastor Christina, you can follow her on Instagram at Christina Gard. You can also check out Grace City at gracecity.com, all the incredible things they're doing in Lakeland and beyond. Make sure you
And your
visit
women's
that website.
conference.
Women's conference?
Yes.
When is that?
This February,
This
Valentine's
February.
Day weekend.
Okay.
That's right.
The 14th and the 15th. This year
Awesome.
we have Christine Kane, Lisa Bevere, and Charlotte Gamble all coming to be a part of our conference.
Excellent.
So
Yep,
I'm
yep.
excited.
Make sure
Thanks
you
for
make sure
saying
you
that.
check that out, everybody. So thank you so much for listening to the Framework Leadership Podcast.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube, now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get incredible leadership content right to your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single week, Framework Leadership. And if you love great email newsletters, and I know I do, make sure you check out keningle.com and subscribe to the Framework Leadership newsletter. It's an incredible piece of content we put out every single week of amazing leadership resources right to your inbox. Make sure you check it out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Kent_Ingle, at Dr. Michael Steiner, on X at Kent Ingle, and on Facebook at Kent.Ingle. Stay up to date on all the incredible things happening on the podcast and at Southeastern University. We love you guys and we love our followers and our subscribers. Thank you so much for listening to the Framework Leadership Podcast.